Okay, this week we have Parshas Re'eh. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Re'eh Anochi nosei lefnechem yom bracha klala. You should see I'm giving before you bracha klala, blessing and curse. I always mention when Chazal tell us, Ezel Chochem Haroas Hanolad, who is a wise man? The one who sees the ramifications of events. He sees what something will bear out. It doesn't say a wise man is Ezel Chochem Hamevines Hanolad, the one who understands the ramifications or understands what the future will bring. He sees the future. But you realize he's not a seer. He's not a visionary. Well, visionary to a degree, that is the reason why he's called visionary. Visionary means, of course, he has a perception and understanding, but it goes beyond understanding. He sees things which the average person doesn't see. Ezel Chacham Haroas Hanolad. We find that the Jews were given a mitzvah that before they left Egypt, to borrow the personal effects of the Egyptians, Kli Chesev Chlizov, the gold and silver vessels from the Egyptians. It was a mitzvah. But yet, there was a precondition to leaving Egypt. They had to take the remains of Yosef with them. Otherwise, they couldn't leave Egypt. Now, who went to seek out the remains of Yosef? Moshe Rabbeinu was the only one. You have millions of Jews leaving Egypt, and the one sole Jew is seeking out the remains of Yosef. And Shlomo Melech tells us in Mishlei, Chacham Lev Yikach Mitzvos. Who's Chacham Lev? The Chacham, the one who has the wise heart, he takes the mitzvos. And the Midrash says, Ezu Chacham Lev, who is this person? Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because everyone else was seeking out the gold and silver, which is a mitzvah. But what did Moshe seek out? He sought out the reins of Yosef. It wasn't so simple. Because the Egyptians, first they had sunk it to the bottom of the Nile in a lead cask. In addition, nobody even knew where it was. And Serach Bas Osher, who refers to the old aunt of Moshe Rabbeinu, she was alive. She was the one initially who had informed her grandfather, Yaakov, that Yosef was alive. She knew exactly where it was, and she informed Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe goes to the Nile. He writes the name of Hashem on a piece of pottery, throws it into the Nile, and he says, Moshe says to Yosef, we're ready to leave now. I'm coming to fulfill the oath which we took that when we leave Egypt, we're taking you with us. We're ready to leave. You want to come? Come. If not, we're leaving you behind. Immediately, this casket weighing tons immediately floats to the surface. Moshe Rabbeinu takes the remains of Yosef, and he meets that precondition. They leave. Why was everybody looking for the gold? Didn't everybody understand that you can't leave Egypt unless you meet this criteria, this prerequisite, taking the remains of Yosef? If you have millions of people, what do we say? Is it possible of millions, not one person that's going to attend to this? It's going to be taken care of. That's a person who says, logically, it doesn't make sense. It's not going to be taken care of. But if you roas hanolad, but if you see it as it is, not you understand it. If it's abstract intellectualism is not absolute clarity. Seeing something is, when you see it, seeing is believing. Moshe Rabbeinu, that he understood that it's possible nobody will attend to it, he better attend to it, otherwise they're not leaving Egypt. With all the gold and silver they may accumulate. Therefore, Shlomo says, Chacham Lev Yikach Mitzvos. The one who has the wisdom that he will take the mitzvahs. Because he has that clarity of sight. Shlomo Melech in Koheles refers to people who are Einei Ha'om. Einei, the eyes of the people. Who are the Einei Ha'om? So the Midrash says the Einiyam are the Torah leaders, the Torah sages. The Malbim explains in his commentary why the Torah lead is called the eyes of the people. So he explains when God created the human being, why the eyes on the highest part of the body? So he explains because to maximize on one sight, the higher the eyes are, the farther one is able to see. It's lower down. It's like, you have a watchtower. Watchtower is way on top, and they watch from a distance. So the eyes being in the upper part of the head, they're able to see rather than if we've been lower down. Who are the eyes of the people? The Torah sages of the people. Because they see things, they understand things that the ordinary person doesn't understand. They have clarity. Not only do they see as a nolad, but they even see the present, which most people don't see. As there's an expression, do you see the forest from the trees? They see every nuance of difference between what is and what's not. Remember, Rav Steinman, Zech Tzaddik Livrocha, I had a very personal relationship with him, and I spent many, many hours speaking to him. He had a level of clarity not to be believed. And he said things which the average person couldn't even fathom would be reality, but he saw it as reality. And I had once met, there's a person, he's the chief rabbi of Rehovot for many, many years. His name is Rav Simcha Cook. And I was going to see Rebbe Yoshev, Zech Tzaddik Livrocha, and he was outside waiting to see also Rebbe Yoshev. And he says to me, he says, he recently met Rav Steinman. And when I was speaking to him then, he was a man already in his upper 70s, Rabbi Cook. And he says, I'm amazed, his level of clarity. And without talking to a person who's a novice in this field, he knew many people, many Torah leaders. He says, a man like that, I've never met before. His clarity and his level of, you can't move him. And he presents his case where with such cogency, and it's so compelling, his position, you can't disagree with him. And that's where he was. And that's why he was the Torah leader when he was alive. And Rav Shach, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, who was the Torah leader in his time, when he felt he was already waning, he passed away at the age of 107, he gave the mantle of leadership to Rav Steinman, because he understood he was the one who has that, he has the shoulders and the capacity to be able to lead the generation. And he did. And he led it with strength and with force, not forcing people. The vigor was unbelievable, his level of leadership. That's Rio. Ezel Chocham Harosa Noled. It's interesting. The Talmud tells us that Chocham Odif Minavi, a prophet, what's the basis for his knowing anything? God communicates with him. The Talmud tells us, Chocham, a person who's a Chocham at the times he's Odif Minavi. He understands things even better than a prophet. The way we're explaining it. What's a Chocham? Roas Hanolad. Because he has this level of wisdom, he sees the ramifications and the outgrowth of many things. All the many steps ahead, he's already dealing with the reality already as if it's a reality. He's more firm than the prophet who prophesizes the future. Moshe says to Klal Yisrael, Re'eh, they used to say, when E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens. Lahavdil Elef Abdolas, Moshe Rabbeinu is the paradigm of Kedusha. He's God's spokesman. He radiates holiness. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, this is what God taught me and to communicate to you, and he says, you should see I'm placing before you, blessing and curse. Ray, see, meaning the context of his communication, the level of clarity was one of a kind. It was a reality. Now, the Talmud tells us that if you have what we call the Sanhedrin, the High Court of Israel, or lower courts, which are qualified to rule on many cases, whether it's death penalty, lashes, penalty, monetary. What is the basis for evidence? In the Torah, there's only one basis for evidence. That's testimony of qualified witnesses. And the witnesses are interrogated. And if there's no discrepancy between the testimony of the two witnesses, then that's considered credible evidence. And the court rules on that evidence, even to put someone to death. That becomes fact. Fact is established through credible testimony, okay? What about if the witnesses, if the judges themselves, the court themselves, they're walking down the street and they witness a crime and they themselves see the crime firsthand? Do they need testimony before them to give a verdict regarding that particular event? Or they themselves could be the witnesses. So you'd say, well, how could they be the witnesses? You have a court and you have testimony brought before the court. So the Talmud says it's a logical concept. Lo teishmi gedola miriya. If we say just hearing evidence is credible to issue a verdict, to render a verdict. So if you see it yourself firsthand, how could that not be sufficiently credible? If third hand, which is not considered hearsay, is credible evidence, so if they visually see it, of course that's evidence. Lo teishmiya gedola miriya. Listening, hearing shouldn't have any greater validity than seeing it themselves. Re'iyah, seeing something, is the absolute. In fact, you should see I'm presenting before you today bracha klala, a blessing and a curse. So there's an obvious question, grammatically speaking. You know, in the Hebrew language, as in many languages, you have the singular and the plural. Re'eh is singular. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to all the Jews. Re'eh, it should say Ru'u. So we speak collectively, it's one entity. But if you read a few words later, it says Lifneichem. Lifneichem is what? That's before you in the plural. We start with the singular and we go into the plural. Let's be consistent. If we're talking about the collective body is one, and we start with singular, let's continue with the singular. And if we see the collective body as multiples, as we conclude in the plural, we should begin with the plural. It should say Ru, not Rei. So what the answer is, when a person, we all see the same thing. We see an event. But the question is, what's the takeaway of that event? I'm presenting it in this absolute clear context. But everybody, based on their own issues, whether it's conflicts of interest, whether it's their intellectual capacity, their experience capacity, their level of maturity, each one takes it away on his own level. We all see the same thing. We see, or seeing is singular. But what the takeaway is individualized. Each of us individually has our own takeaway, how we see it. You know, Chazal tell us, Al todins chavercho ad shetagil l'makomo. Don't pass judgment on anyone unless you're standing in his shoes. You know, what for one person may be effortless, for another person may be monumental in terms of trying to accomplish that. Because the challenges of one are not necessarily the challenges of another person. So therefore, to pass judgment on another person, well, he should be doing better. It's not so difficult. There's no such thing. Everybody's life is tailor-made to address his needs within spiritual context, to make choices that the choices should affect him as they have to affect him. The positive. So therefore, what may be easy for one may be almost impossible for another person, and may not even be a choice. You know, very often I start with people who have very, very almost no background in Judaism. Do you think I present the whole gamut of obligation? Of course not. They have an interest. So I have to have a sense where I should start. and I start at a certain point. And what I feel is the place I should start, I start there. What do you mean? You should teach him much more. A person has a capacity to eat an ounce. Could he eat a pound? Doesn't have the capacity. So everybody is individualized. Everybody's life is tailor-made for him. And you have to dress the person. Person eventually is going to wear a size 40 suit. Now he's only 3 years old. Do you tailor a 40 suit for a 3-year-old? He's 3 years old. And what do you speak to him? You speak to him at his level. Just as intellectually, the child can be spoken beyond a 3-year-old, his age, identically, in terms of a person's capacity, everybody has different capacity, different levels, at different stages in life. And that's how you have to deal with it. Because that person's takeaway is a different kind of takeaway. So Moshe Rabbeinu is presenting in a way, the takeaway is where each person's at. It's lifnechem. It's in multiples. It's very interesting. You know, Rashi is referred to as, by the Meiri was an early commentary. He refers to Rashi as the commentator par excellence. There was never in the history of Jewish people as did a commentator like Rashi. He is known as the ultimate commentator. And he writes that any question which any of the earlier commentators ask on Rashi, if they would understand Rashi and understand the nuances of his words, they would realize the question's not a question, because Rashi in his commentary is addressing exactly what's bothering them. But because even the Rishonim, the early commentators, don't fully grasp Rashi's point, therefore they ask the question. It's due to a lack of understanding. This is what the Meiri writes about Rashi. But Rashi is an interesting commentary. A 5-year-old studies Rashi. He's able to study Rashi. The Vilna Gaon studies Rashi. He has what to study. Whatever level you're at, Rashi wrote his commentary in a way, at the most elementary level, at the medium level, at the most advanced level. A Vilna Gaon, one of the early commentaries, they all learn Rashi. And everyone has a different takeaway, a more profound takeaway. And the more you understand how profound Rashi was. You speak to people, think, Rashi, he was a winemaker, Did he wear pantaloons or what kind of hat did he wear? What was his identity as a Jew? We're talking about a man was a giant. He was an angel plus. That's what Rashi was. Just read his commentary. What he wrote, you cannot study the Torah without Rashi's commentary. Whether it's the written law, whether it's the oral law, the Talmud, anything he wrote on without Rashi, we can't even begin scratching the surface. But it's Re'eh. It's one text for everyone, but it's Lefnechem. Each person has his own takeaway based on his own capacity in terms of what you're able to extract from there. We read in Pirkei Avos, the Torah itself, it says, Hafach bo dekula bo. As much as you turn it, as much as you sift it, everything's there. There's nothing which is not contained in the Torah. Everything. It's interesting. Rashi merited a siyata dishmaya, a divine assistance, and it's known Rashi did write his commentary with divine assistance. To be able to write in his lifetime the amount of what he'd written, it actually reflects the hafrabod, the kulabod. As much as you delve into it, it's literally endless. And the greater the person, the more he has to extract from that commentary. As the Torah itself is hafrabod, the kulabod. Everything's contained within the Torah itself. That is the dimension of Torah. Why hafrabod, the kulabod? Chazal tell us what was the blueprint for creation. It says, Istalku b'roisa bara alma. God looked into the Torah and he created the world. The blueprint for existence is the Torah itself. That means anything that exists in the world, on the terrestrial level, on the celestial level, in the physical world and spiritual world, all that is necessary because that directly corresponds to what the Torah is saying. So therefore, everything that exists is there because it's needed to be able to apply and to implement all aspects of Torah itself, all the systems, in the spiritual sense, in the physical sense, for that reason. Therefore, as much as you delve, whether it's every level of science, every level of planetary, whatever it may be, the galaxies, things that are beyond man's grasp, which are unfathomable, it's all contained there. Because if it wasn't contained there, it would have never been created. Because it's not part of the equation. It's not part of the setting for that reason. So the Torah tells us, I'm presenting before you bracha and klolo, esa bracha. What is the bracha? Asher tishmo mitzvos Hashem Elokechem. Listening, heeding the mitzvahs of Hashem, Asher anochi b'tzaveschem hayom, which I'm commanding to you. Tishmo. You can't actualize the mitzvah unless you first listen to it. You have to have an understanding and appreciation for something is. So if you listen, the listening itself, when I'm telling you what the Or Chaim HaKadosh says, just listening to the mitzvah, even before you implement it, you're already partaking in bracha. You're a blessed person. Because now it's just a question before you do it. What's the klala? What's the curse? If you don't listen, you turn your back on God. A person turns his back on God, you're a cursed person. There's a moral I always mention. Moshe Rabbeinu said in 2 weeks ago in the Parsha, you cleave to God. You live continuously. You're all vibrant in life. So Moral asks why. Why, when you cleave to God, are you actually vibrantly alive? So he explains, what is the source of life? What's the source of all existence? God. God wills every aspect of existence continuously. So if you go and you attach yourself to that source, what are you attached to? The source of everything. So based on the degree that you cleave, Chaim Kul Chaim Hayom. So what happens if you choose to turn your back on that? That's the curse. That means you're cutting yourself off. Well, I know better. You could believe what you want to believe. Lo sishmu. I turn a deaf ear on God. No problem. Then you're a cursed person. Because if the source of everything is listening to God, turning your back on God, you're a cursed person now. Because where does the blessing lie? In your relation with God. If sishmu, if you're willing to listen, I want to have a relationship. Then you're a blessed person. You know, we read in Pirkei Avos, Ezu chocham halomi b'kol. A person who's willing to learn from anyone, he's a wise man. Halomi b'kol. And it quotes the pasuk, David Bel says, B'kol malamdi iskalti. I've learned, I've become wizened from all those who taught me, all my teachers. So Rabbeinu Yora explains, a person who has a vast amount of knowledge, and he says, I know so much I could learn from no one. He's not a wise man. But a person who is nothing, but he's open to learn from anyone, although at this moment he knows nothing, he's classified as chacham. Because if you're open to knowledge, it's just a question of time before you arrive. You're shut down, you're limited to that limitation that you have. And this is so much more than what you have. Therefore, Ezo Chacham Halomi B'Kol Adam. Who's the blessed person? Asher Tishmo. You're willing to listen. Just tell me, I will do. At Sinai, what did we say? Naseh v'nishma. We'll do it. Just tell us what to do. That's even actually knowing, accepting, being open, we're ready to do, then you're blessed. We have a relationship. There's a give and take. That's what it is. If it's so easy, why did yet there was an argument between the house of Beisham Beis Hillel for 2.5 years. It's the only philosophical debate in Shas, in the Talmud. Noch lo l'odam shenivra or noch lo l'odam shelo nivra. Would have been best for man to be created or best for man not to be created. There's the only philosophical debate in all the Talmud between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. And after 2.5 years of debating this issue, the consensus was Noach l'odam shelo nivra. It would have been best for him not to be created. Why? Because if you look at the statistic, most people, they're in the minus column, not in the plus column. Most people fail. So it says, but now that you've been created, how do you make the best of it? Yifashish b'masav, yimashish b'masav. You can't just jump in head first. Everything you do, you have to make an evaluation. You have to focus on it. You have to analyze it. You have to reflect it, whatever it may be. That's yimashmesh, yifashmesh. So the Mesilas Yesharim explains what's the difference between yimashmesh and yifashmesh. They sound very similar. Yimashmesh, you should feel it. You should feel your way through it. So he goes to explain, says something phenomenal. The Ramchal in the Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just, he says, person wants to go buy fabric, and you have inferior quality fabric, you have quality fabric. If a person has a sense of what quality not, he just touches it, and immediately he discerns between quality and inferior. Let's say now the textile seller says, now I'm going to show you grades of quality fabric. And they're all, when you touch it, they all feel like quality. Now, to be able to discern between better quality and less quality, you have to, when you touch it, you have to rub your finger a little bit longer. You have to reflect on what it is. And then you understand which is the true quality, the highest quality fabric. First, it's yimashmesh. You have to first sense, is it right or wrong? And even when you know it's right, is it right enough? Is this the best choice I can make this moment? And even after you've done it, you feel I've done the mitzvah, but maybe I didn't do it well enough. I could have done it better. So it's reevaluating what you've done to do it better even next time. And if you go and that is your approach to life, that you don't make a step without this level of evaluation, then you will succeed in life. That's what it's about. So it's not so easy to succeed in life. So Moshe said, "Es a brocha shetishmu." If you listen, so evidently it's not so easy to listen. It's not that easy. So the Midrash explains it with an allegory. This person's walking, and he comes to a crossroads, and he meets an elderly person at the crossroads, a man who has great wisdom. The road to the right has thorns, has potholes, fishes in the road, and as far as the eye could see, the journey looks disastrous. It'll be an arduous journey going there. To the left, as far as the eye could see, lush greenery, beauty. So, of course, this wise man understood what's going on in this man's head. This man's taking the road to the left. So he says to him, I want to explain you something. It's true, as far as the eye could see, the left looks much more attractive than the right, but I want to tell you, after 3 days travel on the right road, the road to the right, you're going to see beauty and experiences that you've never experienced in your life in the positive. It's only 3 days of hard travel. But once you go through that hard travel, you're going to be over the top. To the left, it's going to be short-lived. It's easy going. But after those 3 days, you're going to be going through something and experience something that you will regret that you ever began that road to the left. What's life? Life is challenges. Nothing comes easy. Everything, and we say, Lufum Tzara Agro, based on the effort, the challenge, that will determine how great the end of the story is. How great, what that destination is going to look like. 70 years versus eternity. What is 70 years? It's a 3-day travel. If after the 70 years you live eternally and you bask in God's radiance, where it says in Pirkei Avos that if you encapsulate all the pleasure of this world into one moment, it doesn't come to the whiff of the world to come. So what's 70 years of labor, of effort, of toil, when the payoff is that at the end of the day? It's 3 days travel. What's 70 years versus eternity? That's bracha, tishmo. Nobody said God has given it away for nothing. You have to show that you're worthy. You have to show your dedication. Klola, latishmo. That's the easy take. You know, there's an expression, they used to say, the FBI always gets that man. You know, you can live a life, you think you get away with it. 70 years living high on the hog with your arrogance and your defiance and everything that goes along with that inflated ego of yours. You know something? After 70 years, everybody goes into the same location in the physical sense. Your food for the maggots and the worms. Welcome, Rima V'Toleo. But you know something, but you got to stand before that judge. And you have to give a reckoning. The person who went through hard times and who's willing to sacrifice and make the effort, when he stands before that judge, he's going to get a verdict which is going to be something so magnificent. The payoff will be something not to be fathomed. The other guy, you want the easy way out, it's all downhill. And the person's going to hear the music. And that music he's going to hear in symphony, in every sense of the word. So that's what Moshe is saying. He's not saying it's easy. There needs to be an expression. It's a long road to hoe. When you hoe something, you got to hoe it. But the question is, what's going to be at the end? Es habrocha asher tishmo. You know, I always say, we spent 40 years wandering in the desert. And why? Because the Jews, they took on positions were unacceptable and they were punished. We say that hindsight is 20/20. After 40 years looking back, every one of those mistakes we made, and we felt the challenge is too great. We realized we were fools because we saw what we saw. It's like seeing it through a distorted lens. Because hindsight, we realized if we wouldn't made that mistake, we would have been in Israel in the promised land 40 days earlier, 40 years earlier. It's the same thing. After you struggle and you've accomplished it, and you know you did the right thing, are you going to give it up so easily? You're not giving it up. It's very interesting, the way God created a person. The Talmud tells us, Adam rotza b'kav shelo yosem tishakav b'shel chaveiro. A person would prefer one measure of his own more than 9 measures of another person. What do you mean? It's 9 times as much. So Rashi in his commentary explains, anything that a person toils for and you put tremendous amount of effort into it, it's more endeared to that person than something that you did not invest in. That's special. So it's very interesting. Something you work hard for and you created through your effort, you appreciate the value of what you created. You're not going to give away something which is money-wise 9 times its value, because that's special. But the way Hashem created a person, that when you see that special, so you understand now, despite the toil and the effort, that only makes it more special. So that encourages the person to do more of the same, despite the effort, despite the toil. So it plays on the psyche of the person to motivate him despite the difficulty. And the more you create through effort, the more special it becomes, the more endeared it becomes to a person. It's very interesting. You know, the Chovos HaLevavos explains that to raise a child, and what a parent has to endure and go through in the physical sense, feeding the child, clothing the child, cleaning the child, mentoring the child, educating the child, plus all the aggravation, is it really worth it? Is it worth it? So he explains that Hashem gives a special love between the parent and child, that the parent should be able to raise that child. Otherwise, a person would not be able to raise that child. There's a maternal love, there's a fatherly love, a paternal love, and because of that special attachment, a person raises that child, despite the sacrifices the parent has to make and put themselves out for their child. Because otherwise, a parent would never raise a child. What you can do for your own, you can't do for a stranger. But yet, the Talmud tells us, if you raise an orphan in your home as your own child, Hashem values it as if you gave birth to that orphan, as if you sired that orphan. Why? But if you need the special effort to succeed, why is that? So the way I understand it is, because when you make the decision you're going to do it, based on this principle, the more you invest and the greater the effort, the more special it becomes. So the more you invest in that child, although it's not your own child, but if you do it, that child becomes endeared to you as if it's your own child. Because without that, it doesn't happen. So just as in the material, when we invest in something, the effort and the sacrifice makes it special, as a result of that, when you invest in Torah mitzvahs, and there the return is truly special, and you merit an understanding of its true value, even more so, you're motivated to do more. And that goes into mitzvah goreres mitzvah. You do one mitzvah, it brings you to do other mitzvahs. It grows. This is called abod l'tar b'saino. So a person wants to purify himself, you merit a divine assistance, Hashem will help you. You know, I used to say over, I heard this from Rav Gifta, Zech Tzarech Levrocha. He once spoke, and he had said over, and this is something he heard in Europe, from the Alter of Kelm. He was the most special student of Rabbi Shol Salanter. And he said, what exactly is divine assistance? What we call siyata d'shmaya, which is Aramaic, assistance from heaven. So he explained that in the medieval times, they would have contests. And if you won the contest, you would win a purse of gold. And they had this ladder, it was about 125 rungs. And you were able to ascend the ladder and get to the highest rung, which had a platform, you'd win the purse of gold. And people trained for years. And for years, people attempted it, and they couldn't do it. They would go up 25 rungs, 30 rungs. The ladder would start swaying. The person would feel that his strength is ebbing. He'd fall to his death. And he'd immediately come down. And for years, nobody was able to do it. Finally, there was a person, he says, my dream is to do this. Even if I fall to my death, I'm giving it my all. And he's already reached, which is unheard of, rung 50. And he says, I'm going to push all the way. He has to reach rung 125. That's where the platform is. And he pushes and pushes. They call up to him, you're out of your mind. You're going to fall to your death. You might as well come down and live. Falls on deaf ears. He's pushing himself. All of a sudden he hits rung. But there was a prerequisite. Before you climbed this ladder, you had to wear a leather belt with a big iron buckle. Iron buckle. The person reaches rung 55. All of a sudden, there's a magnetic force which draws him all the way up to rung 125. So he says that's siyata d'shmaya. A person has to do, when we say God helps those who help themselves, there's certain things which are beyond a human being's capacity. But if you give it your all, whatever you're endowed with, God doesn't expect you to do it on your own. But if you've proven yourself that it's something you really want, and what is the proof? You've given it your all, then God takes you up the rest of the way. That's what divine assistance is. So therefore, part of it is God gives you that sense of value. He motivates you. He draws you. He spiritualizes you. He gives you a capacity to appreciate it. We read in Pirkei Avos, Ezeu asher samech v'chalko. Who is the wealthy man? The person satisfied with his lot. You think it's so easy? What a person's not satisfied with his lot? He's always distracted. He always feels he's shortchanged. Like people used to say, I always get the short end of the stick. So how do you see that the short end is maybe the longer end? Marbin nechos and marbin daga. The more you have, the more headache you have, the more distraction you have. How do you see less is more, rather than more is what, more is more, but more is less? How do you see that? But that's a blessing. That's part of Siyata Dishmaya. The Talmud Chacham who sits and studies, and he is that quality spiritual person. He's not distracted he wants more. God endows him with the ability, the capacity to be satisfied with the less. And he's fully content. As a result of that, he could focus on what he's supposed to focus on. We're not talking about the person starving to death, but he has sparse means, but it's enough. People look at him, they say, the man must be out of his mind. He's living like he's coming from ancient days. Man says, something? If I have my books, I have my studies, I have that, I don't need more than that. I always tell over the story about, I don't know many Hasidic stories, but there's a famous story with the Rebbe Reb Zusha. Famous Rebbe Reb Zusha. And there was this Chassid who was very wealthy, and he had reversals, he lost it all. And he goes to his Rebbe, Hasidic rabbi, and he says, Rabbi, I'm distraught, I'm destroyed, I'm embarrassed, I can't face my peers any longer. I used to be this wealthy man. What am I supposed to do? He says, something? I want you to travel, it's a few weeks travel to my closest chassid, his name is Zusha. He'll teach you how to be happy when you have nothing. So he takes this trip, and he finally finds out where he is, comes to the town, and he's looking for Zusha. So when they mention him Zusha, they say, yeah, he lives in the outskirts of town. There are hovels there. The windows are stuffed with rags. The door is only on one hinge. That you'll find there's an earthenware floor. That's where you find him. Okay, so he definitely has the right address. He has nothing, and he's happy. Okay, travels to the home, knocks on the door. When he knocks, the door almost comes off the second hinge. He goes in, and Zusha comes to the door, sees this Jew. He looks malnourished, emaciated, wearing thread-bad clothing, looks in the house. One chair doesn't match the other, rickety table, earthen floor. And he says, what are you doing? Who are you? He says, the holy rabbi sent me. The moment he hears the name of his holy Rebbe, he glows like the sun. Immediately starts glowing. He says, why did you come? Why did the Rebbe send you? Because he sent me to you to learn from you who has nothing, and you could be happy. Although you have nothing, you could be happy. And I want you to teach me how to be happy when you have nothing. All of a sudden, he gets this dour-looking face. He says, God forbid, I should disagree with the rabbi. I have everything. What do you mean I have nothing? I have everything in the world. I'm the happiest person. I think the rabbi's making a mistake. He sent you to the wrong address. I can't teach you how to be happy with nothing because I have everything. You understand what this is all about? What's need? Need is a state of mind. Contentment is a state of mind. That's a blessing. That when you walk the right road and you see your purpose and you're addressing your value and the objective of your life, you have it all. Everything else is totally excess, superfluous, and distraction. Say, thank God. I'll give you an example. Now we're in the pandemic. The person who, let's say, would be able to discover the vaccine that will address every variant of this thing. And he has the ability, because he's endowed with the ability, the experience, dealing with viruses, he could figure it out. And somebody says, are you out of your mind? You can make it with your intelligence. You can make $1 billion a year. What are you doing this? Man looks at him like he doesn't even know what he's talking about. My whole purpose is to help humanity. I could save all humanity. What am I speaking about? Billions of dollars. Are you out of your mind? That's not my focus. That's not who I am. La'avdil, a person who's spiritually attuned. Every moment, every mitzvah has infinite worth. Serving God is my purpose. But it's a rickety table. The door's coming off its hinge. You don't have windows. There's no window panes. The floor is an earthenware floor. But you know something? I'm in paradise. I have everything. I think the rabbi made a mistake. I'm not happy because I have nothing. I'm happy because I have everything. And that's what it's all about. So siyata d'shmaya, to be samech bechelko, to be satisfied with your lot, that's part of the divine assistance, to be endowed that despite you have nothing, you could be fully satisfied and not distracted, to be fully focused and fully invested in what you're supposed to be invested in. And that's the greatest blessing in life. Every Shabbos and Yom Tov we pray, sanctify us with your mitzvahs and give us our share in the Torah, our portion of the Torah. That's our prayer. That's our supplication. Sanctify us with mitzvahs and give us our share. We're not talking about, give us a fortune in the material. That should be the aspiration and the desire and the hope of every Jew. We say it. Is that what we mean it? I always say it's just not believable. We say every morning, Ashrei, which is Psalms, twice in the morning. Ashrei Yoshvei Yisecha Ot Yad L'Chasela. Fortunate are those who dwell in your house. They will praise you forever. It comes 10 minutes before the service is over. Everybody's run out the door. Could you imagine? Here we say, fortunate are those who dwell in your house. And we say it, we understand what we're saying. So you say, where are you running? A person is doing trades, and every trade he's making a fortune. Is he running off the trading floor when he's making all this money? Where are you running? But everybody's running. They're off. They're off to the rat race. That's where they're off to. So evidently, it doesn't resonate. You may say the words and intellectually, abstractly, it's true. But if you're not touched by it, it means nothing. I know I should be satisfied with my lot. I know what is and what's not, but it's not my reality. And if it's not your reality, you're not there, you're somewhere else. And that's what it's all about. Everybody, it's based on his capacity and based on your choices. As they say in English, the way you make your bed, that's where you sleep. Life is not a moment. Life is made of many decisions. And based on those decisions, it depends where you're at after all those decisions. And that will determine what your capacity is, what degree of divine assistance you merit or you don't merit for that reason. We find as Rabbeinu Bachya, we find that each of the Avos, the patriarchs, were the founding fathers of Klal Yisrael. The DNA, the spiritual DNA of every Jew is the DNA of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. There's a famous Avos Reb Nosson that says, what should the aspiration of every Jew be? Mosai Yagiv Masai L'Masa Avosai. When will my accomplishments be the equivalent of my forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? That should be the aspiration of every Jew. So there's a question which is asked. And if you would say, when your aspiration should be, you should be as great as Rabbi Akiva. You should be as great as the Vilna Gaon. Why the patriarchs? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That should be the aspiration. So they used to say, if you shoot for the stars, you're going to go further. You shoot for less, you're going to fall quite short of where you should be. So we shoot for the stars. Who are the stars? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay? I don't think that's the understanding. I think the understanding is this. The DNA of every Jew, which every one of us possess, is the DNA of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They're the founding forefathers of Klal Yisrael. Every one of them. What is the innate characteristics of all Jews, which the Talmud tells us? Rachmanim, Baishonim, Govim Chasodim. Every Jew innately has compassion. Every Jew innately has conscience and shame. Every Jew innately has the ability or the need to do acts of loving kindness. Gemilas chasodim. Where does this come from? And it's a fact. Per capita, there's no more philanthropic people than the Jewish people, regardless of their religious affiliation. It's something part of our DNA. So therefore, we ourselves possess a potential which is a semblance of the Avos HaKadoshim, the holy patriarchs. The Vilna Gaon, we have no relevance to the Vilna Gaon, but every one of us has relevance to the patriarchs. Every one of the patriarchs, Rabbi Bachya points this out, referred to themselves, we are strangers in a land. Everyone said we are Gerim. Gerim means we don't belong here. We're aliens. We're aliens. Foreign aliens, legal aliens, illegal aliens. When we walk the face of the earth, we're legal aliens, but we're aliens. And therefore what? And because they saw themselves as aliens, why are they here for? They're here to do what they're supposed to do, and then check out time, they're ready to check out. But we have to maximize every moment. And why? But the world is so vast and there's so much opportunity material-wise. What do you mean? What do you mean we're aliens? I own this, I own that. Real estate portfolio, Wall Street, stock portfolio, this portfolio. All this honor, you name on 20,000 buildings across the globe. We're strangers. That's not what it's all about. It's not our name should be in blazing letters. It's not in neon lights. That's what it's all about. It's about what God wants. We're strangers. We're here to do a job. After that, we're out of here. Nothing more than that. Every Jew within his DNA, as he has Rachmanim Baishan Gonei Chasodim, everyone has the capacity to feel that this is a means that's not an end unto itself. It's within our spectrum of choice. Other people, it's not within their spectrum of choice. Do you know why? Because that's not their background. That's not the DNA. Their choices are not our choices. But every Jew, it's within his spectrum of choice. We speak about spectrums. The Jew has a phenomenal spectrum. God forbid you could go south and go off the cliff. On the other hand, you could soar at a level which is not to be believed, which is unfathomable, because we ourselves have that DNA of the Avos HaKadoshim for that reason. So Moshe says, I'm presenting you the blessing and the curse. Nobody's denying it's a hard road to hoe. It comes with challenges, but knowing in advance that God is there not only to hold our hands, but to lift us up. There's going to be that magnetic forces. The more you're involved, the more you desire it. And you see its value, but you have to reach that point. There's a certain critical mass you have to reach to have that sense of its truth and its value, to be motivated, not only for yourself, but for others, to be able to impact the Jewish people and the world, to bring about that level of Kiddush Hashem. We're going to stop here.
Rabbi, thank you.
Be well.
Thank you.
Paul, I don't want you to get out of, you may be too excited, so just calm down. I see it already on your face.
Rabbi.
Yeah? Take care.
Take care, Rabbi.